Please welcome the guy who was voted the 17th best beard on the West Coast.
16th.
16th,
I'm doing
sorry.
great. I was doing better before you said 17.
How many of these specific types of homes are there within, let's say, 25 miles of where we sit here in Washington State?
This specific type of investment property, there's about 4,500 that are currently operating in Washington State, mostly along the I-5 corridor. About 25 miles from here, we're at almost 3,000. The number is quite staggering.
Welcome to the podcast, and today we're talking to a broker with a specific niche regarding real estate investing. He's a broker with Marketplace Sotheby's International Realty, just because they couldn't get a longer name. He's a dear friend of mine, and he specializes in a very specific niche in the investor market. So please welcome the guy who was voted the 17th best beard on the West Coast, Carson Espinoza. How are you, man?
16th.
16th,
I'm doing
sorry.
great. I was doing better before you said 17th, but no, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you, man. I want to talk about specifically investing in real estate. And there's a lot of folks who would like to, but they're worried about having tenants at the property and understanding kind of what the conduct might be. And there's always a worry of people causing destruction to the property and such. And the niche that you have is very, very specific. And I think it would be awesome for people to get kind of more context about it. But before we talk about what the specific niche is, how many of these specific types of homes are there within, let's say, 25 miles of where we sit here in Washington State?
Yeah, so, this specific type of investment property, there's about 4,500 that are currently operating in Washington State, mostly along the I-5 corridor. And from about 25 miles from here, we're at almost 3,000. The number is quite staggering. A lot of them might be right in your own backyard, in your neighborhood. You might not even know that they exist. They're probably the quietest tenants on the block, and honestly, they're the types that you want to have around your neighborhood.
So when you say quietest neighbors on the block, you mean these guys are not specifically throwing massive parties or putting holes in the wall?
Exactly. These are not ragers. You don't have to worry about, an Airbnb or some short-term rental where somebody came in for, the waste management championship with 8 of their golf buddies and are throwing a rager. That's not happening in these.
Right. And surprisingly enough, there's enough demand. This is one of the largest and fastest growing demographics, right? This is adult family homes.
These are adult family homes, and so when we talk about supply and demand, any market has, parameters that change constantly. And this is something where here in the near future and already starting today, we have over 10,000 seniors turning over the age of 65 every single day.
10,000.
Yeah, 10,000. When we talk about the baby boomers and we talk about that demographic specifically, not only do they, are they aging very, very rapidly right now, and we're starting to see a lot of them that are going to be needing care and are thinking about that next stage and chapter for their life, but they also control the most massive amount of wealth that this country has ever seen. So the baby boomers control over $40 trillion in assets and wealth. And, one of the things that kind of really got me into this was thinking about how is that shift going to impact future generations, and what happens financially in our country when mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or whoever that family member is needs to go into care. And so we started researching what were people doing to obtain care. Are they just entering into nursing homes? Like, how does this happen? And it really became apparent to me when my grandfather had to go into care. My grandmother, who was the matriarch of the family, passed away, and my grandfather needed somebody to take care of him. And we did what I think most Americans do, which is we put him in a nursing home, not knowing anything about this type of investment. And you go into a place and you think they're going to be taken care of very well, and how do you pay for it, right? You're talking a few $1,000s every single month at minimum. And this was in Salt Lake City, and you're spending money, and you pay for it by liquidating his assets, going through his pension. You're doing things financially that are really just reducing the size of whatever nest egg that he had left.
Sure.
And, you work your entire life to be able to have some generational wealth to pass on to your kids or your grandkids, and that all went away very quickly.
Right.
And next thing we know, we're moving him to Seattle to live with us in a house that frankly is not very well tailored to seniors.
Right.
We had a couple scares, and we started kind of going down the line of, okay, now we've run out of his cash flow and his nest egg. And, my parents and another couple family members stepped up to help pay for his care. And frankly, the level of care was diminished, and he's in a, big box facility where, the ratio is like 1 to 26 of residents to caregivers, and
Right.
he got his wallet stolen. They lost him a couple times. I mean,
They
stuff like
lost
that.
him a couple times.
Yeah,
That's no small thing.
it's not a very small thing when you go to visit your grandpops and they're like, we don't know where he is.
It's funny now because they found him.
Yeah, yeah, they found him. But
Right.
fast forwarding here to the future, we're starting to think about, okay, what is the plan for my
Right.
parents? Not that they're extremely old, but how are we going to be better prepared for this the next time around? And one of the things that we learned was that less than 4% of Americans have a long-term care plan.
Right.
And what I mean by that specifically is that they have either long-term care insurance, or they've got a prepared, separate part of their portfolio that's ready to pay for their care in the future, whether that's a nursing home, at-home care, an adult family home, whatever that case may be. So it really kind of told us that there's this huge untapped market of people that are really reactive and not proactive.
Let me go back to the homes real quick because
Yeah.
so when you think of adult family care homes, I think that a lot of times we think these big institutions or multiple doors or apartment units or whatever, these are like single family homes that just happen to have 4 or 5 bedrooms, right?
That is basically correct. Every state has different regulations, but these are single family homes that are in your neighborhood. They could be right next door and you wouldn't know any different. They might have a sign up front that says, XYZ adult family home, but other than that, you wouldn't know any different.
Right.
The person that owns that real estate, owns a single family residence, but they also have a commercial business that's running within it. And the unique thing there is, they can be anywhere.
Right.
They're completely protected by the Supreme Court that, you can have an adult family home in a gated community, in an HOA, anywhere.
So is that specifically just in Washington State or is that nationwide?
That's Supreme Court nationwide,
Really?
so they can be anywhere. Washington State happens to be a more regulated state when it comes to the rules and regulations of running the actual home. But I find that to be a good thing in a
Right.
lot of ways because it means that our level of care is higher than in some other states. But yeah, they are everywhere, and they are just single family homes.
That's unbelievable. So this has been around us under our nose, just growing quietly this entire time. As an investment opportunity, is it becoming more prevalent? Is it more mainstream than it used to be? Or is it still kind of one of these under the radar type investments?
I think it's still very under the radar, and I think it's because again, we talk about 4,500 homes in Washington State, but in Washington State, we are capped at 6 residents per home. So you may have a 4-bedroom house, maybe you've got dual occupancy, like a husband and a wife that are sharing in there, or maybe, they've expanded it to have 6, private rooms, in the house, and they've converted the garage or done something creative like that. You can get to 8 residents if you've been in business for 2 years and you've got fire suppression and some other, rules and regulations. But if you think about, let's just use round numbers, if there's 5,000 homes and 8 residents per home, we're only talking 40,000 seniors that are being serviced by this. And, earlier we mentioned there's 10,000 people turning over the age of 65 in our country every single day. So we could have a plethora of these and frankly not scratch the surface for what our supply is versus our demand. So it's definitely, in my opinion, very under the radar.
Interesting. One of the things that I think fascinates me about this is that we had this assumption, I think a lot of people did. I don't know if it was universal, but certainly I did, that people were going to hit a certain age and then end up in extra care facilities, right? They're going to have more attention. They're going to be, getting 3 meals served to them and all that. And I think demographically speaking, way more folks are choosing to age in place in their own home. They're making changes to their home. They're adding elevators. They're adding accommodations for the stairs. Like people who had split levels are just deciding that they're going to stay because it's not worth trying to find some rambler somewhere because
Right.
they just didn't build a lot of those in Washington State. Right. So it's surprising to me how compressed that market is because there's just not a lot of people moving into nursing homes.
Yeah, and it's frankly, it's very cost prohibitive. And again, when you talk about being reactive to something, and then you look at what the average cost is in our state, it's quite high. So, if you were to venture a guess, what do you think it costs per month on average to be in a private pay nursing home?
I'll guess somewhere in the neighborhood of $4,000 to $6,000.
That would be actually on the low side. Most private pay facilities are anywhere between $8,000 and $9,000 a month. So, again, just using round numbers, you're spending $100,000 a year to remain in a place that can take care of you and provide you, good quality of life. And again, these prices can all fluctuate and change depending on Are you somebody that qualifies for Medicare, Medicaid? If that's the case, you might be in, a different type of facility. Are you somebody that needs specific types of care? Are we talking frontal lobe? Do you have Alzheimer's? Do you have dementia?
Sure.
Do you have Parkinson's? Do you have, are you still ambulatory? There's so many different factors that play into that. Do you need medication 3 times a day, every day? I mean, there's all sorts of different things that play into it. So if you're talking about spending $100,000 a year on living, you kind of start doing the math as a family, and you say, okay, we've got X amount of dollars in the nest egg, and we want mom and dad to live.
Sure.
But you see the math, and you're going, we can only afford for them to live for this long, and that's a math equation that I don't think anybody should really have to face.
Right.
Because I think that there's a better way.
Right. What's interesting is that, so we think of nursing home, we think of all these types of care you just described, right? If you're an adult family home, how is that care given?
Yeah, so again, I mentioned Washington State's extremely regulated, which again I feel is a great thing. You have to have the proper licensing. You have to have the right people in place that have their business license hung, that have done the hours. They've spent time either getting their RNs or their CNAs. They've taken all the classes, continuing education, and there's specific things to each style of care. So in an adult family home, the ratios are much different than a big box facility.
Right.
They're not losing my grandpa in a home that only has 6 residents, but has 2 caregivers on at all times. And you've got somebody that knows Tim,
Right.
and knows Tim likes his eggs scrambled, down over easy. Don't give me sunny side up.
Right.
I want to watch Matlock at 7 and my socks warm at 6:45, and I'm going to bed. Like there's a different level of care, and I think that's extremely important as well. But in any business that's out there, the level of care I think is much better.
These folks live in the home along with them, right?
Correct.
Pardon the interruption, but I wanted to share something with you. This video is sponsored by the Neo Experience app, and it's our way to help people no matter where they are in their homeownership journey. So whether you already have a home and you're looking to make a move, or whether you're just trying to get on the housing ladder, this app is going to give you a ton of tools to help you reach your housing goals. Now, to access it, you can visit www.homeownersuccessapp.com and sign up there completely free, or you can just check out the link in the description. If you're on your phone already, you can also visit the App Store and download the Neo Experience app, and then just use the activation code Humphrey to make it completely free for you. Thanks so much for watching. Now, back to the video. Is that a mandatory thing for Washington State, or is that something that is kind of flexible?
It's kind of flexible. You do have to have a provider or a resident manager that's assigned to the house that's really responsible for the operation of the business. In a lot of cases, these have been started by a family because they've got an aging family member, and they've done the math, and they've
Right.
said we can't do this and send mom to a facility and pay $8,000, $9,000 a month. We can run an adult family home. I am a CN, or I am an RA,
Sure.
or a CNA or an RN. Let's convert our home and let's keep them in the house, and let's go down that pathway. But yeah, it's pretty interesting that in a lot of cases, some of these homes, the resident manager or the provider lives in the house, so they're there 24/7, or
Right.
almost all the time, and they can run their shifts, and then they can bring in their other caregivers to kind of cover the rest, which
Right,
is,
right.
in my opinion, a good way to go. And you're always eyes on your business.
Yeah. Well, and it's for this reason that once you have such an ecosystem around this, right, you're not changing tenants, you're not changing residents super often, right? These are long-term folks that are staying in one spot as long as they can. Because one of the worst things you can do is move elderly folks from their environment to something else that's unfamiliar, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think there's it's kind of a two-facet thing, right? If you're owning the real estate, you've got a long-term business that you may have churn in the residents, which we're talking senior care, and unfortunately it does happen. Somebody might pass away, or maybe you have somebody that's on hospice, and it's not a long thing, but you might have somebody that's there for 10 years,
Right.
and they make that adult family home their home.
Right.
And their family comes to visit them in the home, and they are well taken care of, and they see the same faces every day instead of a rotating door of
Yeah.
caregiver A, B, and C that just knows them as a number on the door. They know Tim, or they know Carson. They know
Right.
they know their person. So it is long term, really, for both sides.
Sure.
Really, the only thing that is different. Is you might have somebody that doesn't stay as long as you want them to.
Yeah. I mean, that is the nature of that end of life, right? We see that happen. But that's going to happen regardless. So quality of life leading up to that, always super important. All right. Now let's talk about this from an investment standpoint.
Yep.
I'm not interested in running an adult family home. I don't think that I have specifically the skill set for it. I know what I'm good at. That's not one of those things. But I am an investor.
Yeah.
So if I'm interested in separating the two, so not having the business itself, but owning the real estate, is there an opportunity for that?
Absolutely. First of all, I would say it is not on everybody's heart to change diapers and make food and take care of someone that's elderly and do all the things that these amazing people do. And it's not to say that we don't have big hearts, and I know that you do for sure. But it's not for everybody to go through all those steps to run the business.
I'm going to change diapers at the beginning of life. I'm lukewarm on the end of it. We'll do it if we have to. But
so it's certainly not for everybody to run the business. But from an investment standpoint, there's plenty of opportunity to partner with somebody who's an expert in that field that can run the business for you while participating in some sort of share of profits or having a long-term lease that's extremely beneficial for you. And we see a lot of these cases where somebody owns the real estate, somebody else is operating the business, and really there's no landlord responsibilities typically for that individual. They're very hands-off. They're not coming over to change a light bulb or the toilets overflow.
So does that get handled by the operators specifically?
In a lot of cases, yes. And I think it's going to depend on who the operator is and how the lease has been negotiated. But in my experience and what we like to really write into these leases is that we want the landlord to have the most minimal amount of responsibilities possible, because you might have an investor that's in a different state that was previously participating in short-term rentals, Airbnbs, VRBOs. Maybe they had long-term rentals. They've got a portfolio of different things, and they're paying somebody to manage these properties from afar, and they're churning through tenants. We talked about Airbnbs, and I use that as an example because we have some homes in Arizona, and we've looked at VRBOs and Airbnbs down there, and frankly, we've seen people throw ragers. And next thing you know, the Airbnbs aren't allowed in the neighborhood anymore because it's creating too much of an issue.
No, nobody throws ragers in Arizona. That can't be a thing.
But for these, you look at it from an investor perspective, and you think to yourself, I've got a long-term tenant that's running a business with nothing but demand, not enough supply. The room rates are, where they're at, and they're not changing to go downwards. Their trajectory is to go up.
So there's a good question. So where do you see things going in 5 years, right? Because room rates are what they are now. There's a pretty significant thought out there, most people have subscribed to this already, that the cost of senior care is destined to increase, and it's not going to be a small increase. No. It's going to be a pretty massive increase. So in that case, are you seeing adjustments in the rental market for these adult family homes where some of that gets passed back to the investor in the real estate?
Yeah. So again, it's going to depend on how the lease has been negotiated.
Sure.
In some cases, you've got a lease that's, say, 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, whatever that is. And you're more than likely you're going to have some increases on a year-by-year annual basis where it's, hey, we're going up by X percentage. You might have something where you renegotiate every, specific period of time. So say every 5 years, we're going to renegotiate this lease based on, the prevalency of where the market rates are at. Yeah. You may have something where there's a profit share. So no active participation in the business, but you've got an operator that's in the house that's running the biz, and maybe they didn't have the ability to buy the house or buy the business or buy the the furniture or any of those things. And so there's a lot of different ways and tentacles of ways that you can get engaged in this. But at the end of the day, if you look very minimal just at the room rates and to see where they're going to be in the next 5 years, one of the tools that I use is Genworth Financial Services, and they typically will look at all types of facilities, so assisted living, big box facilities, in-home nursing care, adult family homes, and they project out where they think it's going to be. And Washington State, the number in the next 5 years, so by 2029, they anticipate us to be over $13,500 a month.
Wow.
I will
That's
say
a huge increase.
That's a gigantic increase, but they've also been underneath where it actually has been. So I wouldn't be shocked to see numbers higher than that. Again, it does depend on your level of care and what you need, but if you've got 6 residents in a home and you're running a business at $10,000 a month, your business is doing very well. You can afford to sign a lease with, your landlord that's going to be beneficial for both of you.
Right.
That's the way to go.
Okay, so we know that the care is going to continue to increase, right? Here's a good question. How do you find tenants? Because I don't know about you, in my social circle, I don't have 60 people knocking down my door to get into an adult family home, at
Yeah.
least not at the moment. Hopefully not for a minute. But that's not something that's really in my wheelhouse. So how do you find folks who need this?
Yeah, so a lot of providers are going to find tenants through different methods. Placement agencies are kind of the first way that they go. So there's
Okay.
agencies out there that actually, people will call and say, hey, I have a mom or dad that needs care. What do I do? There's also businesses that are out there that can consult on giving you the steps to be financially ready for this. But a placement agency will literally accept your call, contact one of their adult family homes that they've got a relationship with, or they're just going to go through a list, and it depends on which placement agency it is. We've worked with All About Care here in Linwood very closely over the last few years, and they do a fantastic job of placing people in the correct houses based on the level of care, based on their needs, their personalities. And I think that it's important for them to be in the right kind of home. But placement agencies are a good one. A lot of adult family homes aren't great at marketing, but marketing is a very effective tool for, bringing residents into your home should you need to have one if you have a vacancy.
Sure.
Relationships with bigger box assisted living facilities where they're at a level of care that the big box can no longer provide for them. So now they need to be in a place that's, much closer 24/7 care. But there's different ways where you're able to get your tenants in. Again, we've hit this over and over again, but the demand is only growing.
Right.
If people knew that this was an
Right.
option, I can't imagine somebody going into a big box facility versus an adult family home where they're
Right.
getting a much better catered level of care,
Right.
in my opinion.
So we talked about aging in place a little bit ago. How would you suggest somebody go about? So let's just say, for example, this was a scenario that was close to my life. So grandma and grandpa, at a certain point, were no longer able to take care of themselves. They preferred to go and stay in their home. We weren't able to make a decision like this at the time. But what if they would have converted their home that had, it was, I think, 6 bedrooms at the time. They had it for forever. They bought it in the super early 60s. What if they were able to convert that to an adult family home? Would they have been able to stay in that home as opposed to the alternative?
That's one of the things when we talk about wealth stewardship, and we talk about how quickly that nest egg can quickly diminish. You have, say, a family member who's owned their home for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years,
Right.
50 years, and they bought the house for $60,000 in
Sure did.
1960 or whatever
Yep.
it is, and now it's worth 1.2 or 1.3, and
You
again,
nailed it. That's exactly what it was.
there you go. Yeah. And so either they're selling the house,
Yep.
kind of the 4-letter word for me is reverse mortgage. Don't say it hurts my heart. And they're
It's
doing
okay
these
in
things.
some instances.
Some instances, maybe I won't step on your toes. But they're doing these things to pay for them. But if you've got a house that can lend itself to be an adult family home, there's a scenario where you could partner with somebody like me and convert your home into an adult family home, and you can stay in place. Maybe we build an ADU onto the house, have your own separate entrance. You've got your own kitchen, living room, bedroom, bathroom, and the rest of the house is an adult family home. So now let's say you had a mortgage, and you're paying a few $1,000s a month for your mortgage, and you're going, okay, we've got a mortgage, and now we've got to pay for care.
Right.
What if you flipped that, brought in residents into your house, and now you've got roommates,
Yeah.
kind of, right?
Sure.
Housemates, but now your house is actually generating income for you.
Right.
And that nest egg is no longer shrinking in size rapidly,
Right.
but it's actually staying exactly where it is, or it's growing.
Right.
And then inevitably, when that next stage happens, and mom or dad unfortunately go to heaven, or then that passes on to your kids.
Right.
And so then we talk about that wealth stewardship, and for me, I'm going, $40 trillion in assets. Are we going to be inevitably giving all this money to healthcare system?
Sure.
Or is it all going into senior care? Or are we all putting insane amounts of money down to get mom or dad into an assisted living facility?
Right.
Or is there a better way to do this?
Right.
And I think that this is it.
Right. Well, one of the things is we talk about like the loneliness that seniors experience, right? Because they're not as mobile. They're not
Right.
necessarily driving themselves everywhere. So,
Right.
sometimes roommates isn't the worst thing in the world. It might actually help them in their social skills, right? And then maintaining a lot of the cognitive abilities that we
Absolutely.
hope they have later on. All right. Let's talk investment. How does somebody get into something like this? Because I'm not going to take the classes and go get licensed and decide that I'm going to be the caregiver.
Right.
But I'm very interested from an investment standpoint. So how does somebody start the process of engaging with somebody like you or getting an adult family home. At least,
Yeah.
and then two-part to that is the second part that I want to get to is like, what is the step beyond that? Do you get a second one? Do you keep this as part of your portfolio? And so we'll go that way.
Yeah. First, call me.
Okay.
No, I'd love to, connect that individual with the steps, in place to do it.
Sure.
Like buying any investment property, whether you've previously done, a long-term rental in Arizona, or you snowbird, or you rainbird, or you want to go golf in Palm Springs during the winter months. And you've got a house that's sitting there 6 months unoccupied, or however you bought your second property, or your third property, or your 50th property. The process is very similar. There are some different rules and regulations, and I'll certainly let you talk about that because that's more your arena. But there are investment vehicles out there to get into a secondary home, and if that secondary home is an adult family home, there's ways of leveraging an existing lease if there's a business already there.
Sure.
Again, are you buying just the residence, or are you buying the residence and the business? If you're buying the business and you're not running it, are you connected with the right person to be the provider and have their license hung under that individual? So there's some different steps there, but that's where working with an expert that really kind of lives in this niche can kind of help you navigate some of those nuances.
So then, as part of the bigger investment portfolio, are you seeing people who have short-term rentals and long-term rentals also incorporate this as part of it? Or are you seeing the people who start in the adult family home worlds tend to stay there because of the profitability?
Yeah, people that start in the adult family home business, typically their goal is to get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And they see how, believe it or not, it's easier to run 2 adult family homes than it is to run 1.
Interesting.
The math just works out in a way that, if you're running it yourself and, you lose 1 tenant versus I've got 2 homes that are running and I'm only at 80% capacity on both, the math still works out better.
Sure.
But being able to, even if you're hands off and you're not engaged in running the business, like somebody like myself or you would be, having multiple of these where I've got a long-term lease where I don't really have landlord responsibilities is fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't have to pay a management company to do property management. I've got somebody that's vested in the property, in the profitability of their business, in keeping it full, in paying their rents on time, in keeping the house clean, keeping it updated, making my landscaping look good, all the small things that typically go the wayside with long-term rentals.
Right. And by the way, you still get the appreciation of owning an asset of that size.
Exactly.
And somebody else is paying your lease, and it cash flows right out of the gate. Let's talk about the way that you can get into these from a financial perspective. So I know a little bit about SBA loans. That's one of the ways that you could do it, right?
Definitely, you can go SBA, and SBA is something that you can utilize if you're buying both the property and the business. If we're not buying the business, let's take SBA out of the equation. But SBA can and cannot be, it depends on where you're at in the market, a good way to go or not. As they typically will fluctuate with the market, and they're usually prime plus 2. And, so if you got in at 2.5% or 3%, they
started off great.
They looked really great, and now they're a little bit tighter. So may or may not be the best way to go. But the great thing with buying the business, which is a separate purchase from the residence, the real estate. If you've got a current home and you've got great equity in the home, and you've got the ability to do a HELOC, you can do that.
Sure.
You can look at your retirement portfolio of what you have. And I'm not a financial advisor, so I won't speak to that specifically, but I can tell you.
So you're not going to play one on the podcast?
No, I'm not going to do that. But if you've got a portfolio that, is, say moving along with the S&P 500, or, it's just in your 401k and your stock has been flat, or it's gained 2 or 3% over the course of the year, and you can utilize some of that, some of those assets to purchase a piece of real estate and or a business that is giving you much better cash on cash returns, that might be a better way for you to go. And it oftentimes is. We've had some instances where, we've seen, somebody liquidate some of their stock, and, they put it into, 1 home, 2 homes, or, I had one where they put it into 4 homes, and the returns were phenomenal. So that was something where, they really were able to win without having any daily interaction or even really weekly interaction with, the operation of the business. They just get their rent checks, they get their profit share, and they move on happy.
Yeah. It's amazing. The SBA has been awesome, at least as a resource for people who are looking to buy the business as well. What's unique about them is it's a variable rate, right? And so you see a lot of fluctuation, and so your cash flow can change pretty wildly. I'll just speak to the mortgage perspective. This is its very own animal. This is not a conventional loan. It is not a slam dunk. There are very specific, specialized programs for this. Interest rate is the least important thing in this entire equation because frankly it's going to cash flow, right? So really your big hurdle from a mortgage perspective to get something like this done if you're just buying the real estate is as long as you have the down payment and as long as you can make sure that this cash flows, you're going to be okay. But realistically, getting on the board with one of these, the first one is usually the hurdle because after it's been on the books for 12 months, now you have an operational business and you've got business history and you can use that income to buy your next one. But one of the things that makes a lot of investors, the folks who buy mortgages, nervous is that nobody wants to evict senior citizens. And so because of that, your specialized programs are the ones that can accommodate this. It's not the ones that are, generic, right? You're not gonna get a regular conventional loan with 3 or 5% down to do this. This is gonna be very niche. And the question that I routinely get is, well, where does this go wrong? How come you can't do that and just magically let it happen? And just gets converted into an adult family home. And really the answer is that the folks who buy mortgages are doing their due diligence to make sure that this is not showing up posted on a website for adult family care.
Right.
And if so, they can, at worst, they'll call the note and just say, by the way, you see you have this mortgage, we'll take that whole thing from you now.
Yeah.
And that's a big risk, right? So you want to make sure that you go through it properly. And you want to make sure that, when the appraiser's going there, you haven't moved a bunch of extra washers and dryers out the back. And so that they see that there's all this extra laundry and it is going to be used as a commercial facility. So you want to play by the rules in this, just because the penalty is so high, right? And so there's programs for it. There's accommodations for it. There's ways to get it all done. But man, this is one of those. It's not just how you get it done. It's that you can get it done efficiently, and it's having somebody on your team who can really see around corners because it's a labyrinth.
It is. It's if you don't, oftentimes we say this, right? Like, businesses fail because you don't know what you don't know.
100%.
And this is something where, again, if you're not operating the business and you want to be hands off, it's a much cleaner thing. But if you want to be engaged on both sides and this is your first time dipping your toes into the water, it is really important to go with somebody who can help guide you along, up Mount Everest, because you need a Sherpa on this one. And not to say that you can't do it alone. And many people are very successful going through that. And
so to that end, do you know of a Sherpa service that can help with this?
Hi, my name is Carson.
Okay.
It's definitely something where we've been able to partner with a lot of people that have been very successful in this industry over the course of the last few decades, and we've seen this footprint grow not only here in Washington State but in others around the country, and it's just been phenomenal to really learn and dive into this industry because it is near and dear to my heart because I know this would have been a great solution for my family. Looking forward. Even as somebody who's, I'm not there yet, but I will be eventually. And I don't want my kids to have to worry about where's my care, where's anything like this. I'm thinking to myself, everybody in my age bracket that has some sort of investment capability should be looking into, owning real estate, which is the greatest wealth producer in history, but also some real estate that doesn't require landlord responsibilities, that has long-term fiscal, returns, that has great cash on cash returns, that is also serving a great purpose.
Sure.
And when I am ready for that, I'll just move right into one that I already own. And I think that's what's really cool about this is that there's a purpose to it. And if you work with the right people, and there's a handful of individuals here that really know this market and can guide you.
I love it, man. You're doing the Lord's work, getting people in good homes. It's very cool. Do you want to play a quick game of this or that?
Let's do it. I don't know what that is. Let's do it.
All right, let's have some fun. So let's put 30 seconds on the clock. This is just going to help people get to know you really quick.
Okay.
And then let's just see how we get on. All right. So if you're playing at home, just see how well you can peg Carson. So 30 seconds on the clock. Choose this or that. Ready? Okay. Big city or small town?
Small town.
Morning or evening?
Evening.
Summer or winter?
Summer, baby.
Ooh, chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Movies or TV shows?
Ooh, TV shows.
All right. Thunderstorm or snowstorm?
Snowstorm.
All right. Breakfast food or dinner food?
Brekkie.
Good. Could have said brunch too. That's also acceptable.
Oh.
Tacos or sushi?
Tacos.
Good. Pickleball or golf?
Oh, brother, that's a tough one. Because I'm all about that pickleball right now. I gotta say golf. That's a hard one.
That is a hard one. How do you want people to find you?
You can find me at homesbycarson.com. You can also find me at Marketplace Sotheby's International Realty. Just look up my name, Carson Espinoza. You can also find me just online. I'm the only Carson Espinoza, I think, in Washington State. But yeah, easy to find. You can reach me at 206-669-9959. My email, all sorts
I'll
of
link
stuff.
all your information in the show.
All
notes.
this stuff.
Thanks for being here, man. It's been great to
Absolutely.
have you.
Appreciate you.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please feel free to hit the like and subscribe button. We'll bring you more all the time. We'll link all of Carson's information and the best way to find him, along with some helpful resources if you're interested in getting more information about adult family homes. Thanks so much for joining us. Until next time, please stay curious.